Good morning and welcome to the United Workers' Party press conference, the first press conference for this new year of 2022. Let me take this opportunity to wish all St. Lucians at home and abroad a very happy new year and wishing you all the best for this year. Starting off this press conference today catches us all at a time of much concern. It is only the first month of the year, and yet the numbers as far as the COVID pandemic, which has gripped the world for the past 2 years, is continuing to have its effects on lives and livelihoods. In considering all the facts in this, we are reminded again of this very same period last year in January of 2021, when the numbers of cases, active and detected, were significantly lower. Well, 2021, when the United Workers' Party formed the government of St. Lucia, the active cases or the detected cases on the 12th were 12 cases as opposed to 83 cases. Let me say that again. The number of reported cases last year on January the 6th were 2 cases. The active cases were 83. Contrast that against the same date, January the 6th, 2022, with the current SLP administration forming the government at 182 cases reported and 773 active cases with 1 death. As it stands today, with the reported cases, we are now at 2,000 active cases in St. Lucia. And the current SLP administration has gone full steam ahead to reopen schools. Not forgetting that last year, at the very same time, with significantly lower numbers of cases, the SLP, then in administration, insisted, in fact they demanded, that the government close schools because our tourist markets were open to some of the most infected countries in the world, and they referred to the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States. With these astronomically high numbers today, these same markets are open, but we are now faced with a significant challenge of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus. And that is even more contagious and more infectious to our students. Yet still, our schools remain open without consultation with the teachers. This flies in the face of any reason and continues to show the hypocrisy and double standards of the St. Lucia Labour Party when in opposition, as opposed to when they make the government, they form the government. Our first speaker today will be Fedee, who is the former Minister of Tourism and the former head of the COVID-19 Command Center here in St. Lucia, Dominic Fedee. He is also the current Senator for the United Workers' Party in our House of Parliament.
Let me say good morning and a happy new year to the head table. And for those of you watching via television, I want to say a special good morning to our moderator, Norbert. We are gathering here today, COVID-19, sure that we manage this virus as a country and get this under control. Let's put the politics aside. Let's forget a couple points we're going to score for a moment, and let us please put the interests of the people of St. Lucia first and foremost. And so you could be with someone who's on their way to the health center tested positive. You could be in the supermarket today and someone who's feeling better, but yet they have the COVID virus within their system still, not having gone through the full incubation period of 14 days. Lead on this matter. You have set the wrong tone coming in to government. By the first and the most urgent thing you do is to expunge the records. And when you set the tone to suggest to people that there's a free-for-all, then among families and friends and loved ones who naturally and so there ought to have been a more proactive approach to ensure that our island, its impact on the health system, it leaves we see in the private sector is growing at an alarming rate. Employees continue to be concerned about job security. And some are not even bothering to report the cases because it's a matter of survival. Are not being paid if you don't work. Hotels are seeing massive cancellations as we speak today. As we see both airlines, passengers are canceling their vacations. We're seeing as much as 15 to 20% in some hotels. This is proving to be a nightmare, and the government does not seem to have an answer to deal with this ever-present that is facing our country. When they assumed the government back in July of last year, we begged and we pleaded, let us continue to consult in a collaborative way as we have. I asked the question to the powers that be, when last have we had a NEMAC meeting? When last have we brought together civil society? When last had a meeting with the trade unions and the private sector organizations and the schools and all the various entities that make up the NEMAC grouping so that we can sit down and make informed decisions, making sure that we consult with all the various sectors. This worth consultation ought not to be the Minister of Ed. That is so because of a lack of leadership. That is so because the government, they have abandoned the science of dealing with COVID-19 management in this country. All indicators show. I want to ask the question today, what are we doing to support displaced workers? Where is the income support promised? Where is the adequate resources for the bus drivers who we see getting just a portion of what was promised to them? Where is the support for the taxi drivers? Where is the support for the vendors who continue to bleed, who continue to look after their families and meet their monthly living expenses? These have become very difficult because today the vendors have not been able to benefit in a real way from the reopening of our cruise industry. And, you know, instead of making sure that they come and hit the ground running, this government continues to pander to various interest groups in this country. They continue to pander to special interest groups rather than dealing with this COVID situation in a systematic way so that we can all come out of the hole that we're in. And so, it's not looking good, unfortunately. I hate to be a messenger of doom and gloom, but nothing that this government has shown so far has given me any confidence so that I can feel comfortable to say that at least there is some hope on the horizon. This continues to be at best a disaster. It continues to be at best a precarious position that we continue to put our country in. My plea today is for them to please to get a handle of this virus. We cannot continue. The disruption to business, the disruption to growth, and to create new opportunity for people. COVID-19 continues to be a stumbling block, and our plea today is for the authorities to deal with it fast and deal with it urgently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic Fedee. Coming up next will be UWP Senator Angelina Phera, who hails from the constituency of Dennery North. Polius.
Good morning, colleagues. And good morning, a pleasant good morning to all our listeners, our viewers. Good morning to all St. Lucians. The intention of my presentation is not to deliberate on whether or not students should return to school for face-to-face instruction, but rather to interrogate the decisions of this government regarding the resumption of school, and to highlight the persistent vindictiveness of this Labour Party administration. You would recall that in January of 2021, Philippe J. then leader of the opposition, and his team chastised the United Workers' Party government when it gave the nod for schools to reopen following a spike right after the Christmas holidays. He criticized the former UWP administration's decision as irresponsible, claiming that the timing of the reopening of school was incredibly poor. Now, 1 year later, the Prime Minister and his cabinet has taken the exact same decision at a time when Omicron, a highly contagious COVID-19 variant, is confirmed in neighboring sister islands and suspected right here in St. Lucia, although not yet confirmed. The Prime Minister admitted on more than one occasion that there would have been a spike following the Christmas festivities. And as expected in this fifth wave, St. Lucia has recorded a steep increase in the number of persons who are infected on a day-to-day basis. More than double the infection rate experienced in January of last year. So what is different now, Mr. Prime Minister? Can your decision to reopen school amidst worse conditions be viewed as responsible and caring? Why couldn't you take this very same advice that you offered when you were in opposition? Your recommendation was that you should keep, or the administration should keep schools closed until the transmission rate had been reduced to at least 5 cases per week. Have you forgotten? From the very onset, where that making the transition from face-to-face modality to teaching and learning online would present challenges to all those persons who were involved, principals, teachers, parents, students, and other stakeholders. And that any decision to be made regarding the modality to be used, whether it was face-to-face, online, or a blended approach, any decision had to be made in consultation with all relevant stakeholders. So how can an important decision such as the reopening of school during a spike at a time when the infection rate is much higher, how can such a decision be made without consultation with all critical stakeholders such as the teachers union and parent-teacher associations of various schools across the island? Not to mention the very teachers who are to deliver instruction to our children, the children of St. Lucia. This is a serious indictment on your part, Honorable Sean Edward, as Minister of Education. It shows a blatant disregard for the anxieties and concerns of the people who are directly responsible for instructing the nation's children. During the UWP administration, the teachers union was fully engaged. Consultations were held, and they had so much to say about the preparedness of schools and the safety of teachers. They protested that the infected numbers were too high. In November of last year, when the deadliest variant, Delta, was here, the number of deaths kept escalating. Teachers were asked to return to school to provide face-to-face instruction. Amidst all of this, where was the teachers union then? Not a word from them, not even a whisper. And today, we are told that the union was not regarding the reopening of January for the second term. And if they were not consulted, why didn't the union ask for an audience with the Ministry of Education or the minister responsible for education, Honorable Sean Edward? Have they neglected their members when the situation is even more dire? These are important questions that we need to ask. On the first day of school, fellow St. Lucians, some children had to be sent back home because they exhibited flu-like symptoms. Another important question to ask is whether this government has fulfilled its promise to provide every school a health aid and COVID-19 testing kits. Of course, healthcare personnel at every school would help to test students who exhibit flu-like symptoms, as it is important to determine whether or not these children are infected, so that the necessary safety measures can be taken to avert transmission to family members in the home. There are teachers who have called in sick in some schools. Students whose teachers are absent have been asked to stay home. Furthermore, due to the fear that the children, some parents have actually made the conscious decision to keep their children at home until they notice a significant decline in the number of COVID-19 cases. And that is understandable. For while children may not necessarily exhibit major symptoms, they may still transmit the virus to family members, their grandparents, their siblings, particularly those persons who have pre-existing conditions like hypertension, diabetes, asthma. Mr. Minister, isn't it a fact that right there in your own constituency, children from 2 schools were tested positive for COVID-19 during the first term? Did we hear any statement or reaction from you, Honorable Sean Edward? Not at all. And had you been in opposition today, wouldn't you have by now touched the roof and called for the closure of schools? Yes, I know you would, and many others. You would be clamoring for schools to be closed. So mixed concerns and apprehension expressed by many parents and teachers should have never, and I repeat, should have never escaped your mind and responsibility as Minister of Education. So that apology, Mr. Minister, to the Teachers Union, wasn't that a mere pacifier? Just to keep the union quiet or to suppress any chaos that may potentially arise? Fellow St. Lucians, the United Workers' Party continues to place on record this government's, this Labour administration's persistence in victimizing some of the workers in this country. The obvious vindictive posture of the Minister of Education and by extension the Cabinet of Ministers has of late left many bus drivers who were previously employed in the school transportation subsidy program across the country without a means to provide for their families. And I just want to draw an example. I know that it is affecting every single family that has been impacted. But in his own constituency of Dennery North, the contracts of all bus drivers but one was not renewed simply because Honorable Sean Edward believed that these drivers did not support him during the election. That is payback time, right? Payback time, Mr. Minister. But oh, how insensitive and uncaring. Oh, how callous. All those whom you have victimized are all St. Lucians. They're not Vincentians, Grenadians, or Barbadians. They are St. Lucians. Right. And are you forgetting, Mr. Minister, that right after election, when you drove around to thank constituents for their support, you announced that you were now representing everyone and that your office was open to both Labour and UWP supporters? Every single one? But you know what? I knew this wasn't true, you know. Because this is not what you preached. This was not your message. And even if this Labour Party administration, the Prime Minister and his cabinet, continue to say to St. Lucians or make St. Lucians believe that they are working in the best interest? We must think again, because what we see is really contradicting what they are saying. How malicious and callous can the behavior of this administration be? And you know what, St. Lucians, what's most baffling? Most of the persons who were issued contracts do not even own a bus or have a driver's license. They now have to resort to renting buses from displaced contractors or to hire drivers to work for them. But this is not all. Newly contracted drivers have received no training in COVID-19 management and do not even comply to the protocols, putting the nation's children at greater risk. Can you imagine that some students had to walk from Choiseul to Vieux-Fort? Our children are the ones paying for it. The nation's children. What kind of politically driven madness is this? This is intolerable. And in this country, we have to take a stand. We must. But let me hasten to add that we are not opposed to contracting other citizens to work. However, the manner in which the Minister of Education and the Cabinet of Ministers have gone about this sends a very strong message to you, the people of Dennery North, the people of St. Lucia, all constituents, that this Labour Party does not care about all St. Lucians. It cares about some, its own flock. In closing, the United Workers' Party wishes to assure you that the time is approaching. The time is approaching when you will be liberated from a government that lacks compassion. A government that cares only about a selected few. A government that puts politics first. A government that fails to take its own advice and is hell-bent on destabilizing and victimizing St. Lucian families. It is not over. So be encouraged. Stay strong. Stay safe. The United Workers' Party will rise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Angelina Phera. It is baffling, the statements made by this current administration as well as the current Minister of Health, Moses Jean-Baptiste, when in a press statement after the Christmas vacation or Christmas season last year, a few weeks ago, stated categorically, along with the Prime Minister and others in this SL administration, that even though having witnessed the increased activity and knowing of the increased activity in St. Lucia during the Christmas season, that the protocols would not be tightened. In fact, there were many calls with great concern about the 1 a.m. curfew, the unconstitutional curfew, and that the hours should be pulled back in light of the tremendous activities which were noticed during the Christmas holidays. And again, Moses Jean-Baptiste, the Minister of Health, refused and went further to state that the protocols would be tightened after the 7th of January 2022. All of this against the backdrop of the looming Omicron variant, the information that students were being infected at much higher rates than with the other variants, and that St. Lucia's population is significantly under-vaccinated. Amidst all of those cries for people of St. Lucia, the SLP administration, the Minister of Health, the Prime Minister, and all others claiming to be guided by the science, refused to apply common sense. The numbers witnessed yesterday bear testimony to the concerns of the people of St. Lucia and their justification in calling for more stringent measures before the COVID-19 pandemic, which we have all witnessed for 2 years now, which we have all experienced and learned all together what needs to be done to protect our country. This government, having to profess, back then when they were in opposition, having all the answers and the solutions, have now failed to heed their own advice, to apply their own advice. And we are seeing now, under this administration, as witnessed last year and as witnessed yesterday, record numbers in deaths, in positive cases, and the outlook for St. Lucia is more grim than ever before. This current administration appears, by all accounts, to be clueless, to be lost in space, and to be simply praying for a miracle. Coming up next is former Minister of Culture, and she is also the Deputy Chairperson of the United Workers' Party, Fortuna Belrose.
In our midst, and we're happy to have you, Mr. Peter Josie, here with us, consolidating of delivering, because you felt our wrath, for a few years. The UWP lost the elections in July 26, 2021. Our organization believes in the values and principles of democracy, and as such, we respected the wishes of the people to allow the SLP to take on the reins of government. So we are not dead. We're just doing our work. And we will play our game and play dead to catch Kobo alive. And it looks like we're heading in that direction. It's been 5 months, and my word, we have never seen a government lose favor with its law-abiding citizens so fast. Law-abiding citizens so fast. The intent on putting you first has now manifested as confusing you first. And now that many people are confused, some are bewildered, baffled, and they feel duped, this Labour Party has returned to base and is in their usual vindictive tone, with blatant acts of disrespect, discrimination, and victimization. They are driving citizens off the wall and into a grave of despair. Ladies and gentlemen, Our country continues to be in a very dangerous place. There is rampant victimization. Hundreds of vulnerable people have lost their jobs, you know, and they lost their jobs after drinking the potion, putting you first. People are now struggling to survive in an environment where all we hear is blame, 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 and Chastanet did this and Chastanet did that. The UWP did not win the elections. The SLP won the elections, and the SLP has to demonstrate to the people of St. Lucia that they can lead without blaming and going backwards. So what do we have today? We have a number of council workers who are unemployed. Caregivers have been sent home en masse. Bus drivers have been sent home en masse. School attendants have been sent home en masse. Construction workers have been sent home en masse. You know, no work. These are people in the front line of our society. You know, they're in the front line. Men and women with children, you know, with loans, you know, and they have to care for their families. But yet we've sent them home after they drank this potion, putting you first, or putting us first, or putting them first. What a bluff. What a shame. You know, take the story of the bus drivers that have been so well articulated by my colleague. These bus drivers, you know, were under their legitimate expectation that the contracts would have been extended or the contracts would have continued. They trained COVID bus drivers for children with their H plates. You know, many of them are well trained. Many of them have great track records in the communities they come from. The parents of the children know them. They trust them with their children, you know. And you're saying to me, the Ministry of Education, under my good friend, Sean Edwards, is treating people that way? It's a shame. Something is wrong with the mentality of the Labour Party. Something is fundamentally wrong, because this is not the Sean Edwards I know. This is not the Sean Edwards I know. The people contracts were not renewed. And what is worse, they issued them a four-week contract after the contracts came to an end, a 4-week assignment. And then they released them because they appointed new bus drivers. And what they did, they have not paid them. Is that putting people first? Who is concerned about the welfare of our bus drivers? Who is concerned about them and their families? That has not happened. And Labour, to be honest with you, Labour is a great disappointment, and they will continue to be a disappointment for the people of this country. This is beyond comprehension. And I'm saddened that I have friends who belong in this institution. People who are employed are confused today, you know, as they've been forced into unemployment, throwing their households into chaos because they can't meet their commitments and buy food for their families. I'm talking about the ordinary little man on the street who had his little job, doing a little caretaking role, working in the supermarket. You know, this is the doctrine of Labour. Buy you, confuse you, and dump you. It is this very government that assured them that they were putting them first. And while in opposition, they promised to give them money because they could not eat roads. How can our society remain calm when people, you know, people's lives are in turmoil? You know, their lives have been transformed. Now, since this government has come into office, we have seen a significant rise in criminal activities across the country. Now, and while we cannot gloat on this, to be honest with you, it is a cause for concern. It is a cause for concern and must express it. But then again, the wrong message was sent when the Prime Minister moved to expunge the free his supporters who will not COVID protocol rules. Leaving it up to moral persuasion, that's what he says. But a short while later, he returns with penalties for the same issues, and stress that persons need to be punished for not observing the protocols. What double standards? Yeah? Flip-flopper. can't hold a stand. What can a man gain from seeing other human beings suffer, in that way? The current Prime Minister cried foul every day for 5 years. If there's one song we know, he has delivered, it's victimization and vindictiveness. Victimization and vindictiveness. Victimization and vindictiveness. Two of his favorite words. And today, under his regime, our nation clearly understands and is experiencing unprecedented levels of victimization in this country. In our COVID environment, people are being treated with scant regard. It's COVID. People are already suffering with COVID. Do these people's lives matter? Is there any sensitivity and concern being radiated from these heartless leaders? That's what I see and feel. And you talk about putting people first. There was support. There was meals being distributed. There was support for farmers and support for this one and support for that one. That was existent. It was rampant. It was all over. We were doing something about it. The question is, what are you all doing? All I'm seeing is an attempt to destabilize the society and keep families apart. Since July, we have had 45 homicides. One would have thought that with Labour Party winning the elections, our society would have been a lot calmer. Yeah? We thought they would have been a lot calmer because you put in people first, everybody belongs, you understand? So we thought it would have been a lot calmer. But what it has spewed is record levels, you understand, of criminality and homicides across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, something is not right. Something is not right about this. When I served as Minister for Culture in the regime under Honorable Alan Chastanet, there was a grave crime committed in the community of Marchand. A young man who gave his life to community. His life was snapped short. And what we did was we memorialized him on the walls of the community. And that added significant value to calming the people of that constituency. Calming. Recently, we had 3 young people, Leah, Dawn, and Amigo, killed brutally on the streets of a community they love, where they sat and had fun. And I'm hoping, and I'm looking to the leadership of this country to see if, in fact, there'll be any attempt to not just celebrate them by burying them, but providing an avenue for young people to learn from the lessons and the lives of these young people. So we're waiting to see what will happen. My colleagues have said a lot, so I'm just looking now to cut short the presentation. But crime continues to touch all our lives. And in recent times, even my own extended family has been affected by criminality. And it is our hope that the police will continue to do their work in terms of delivering what they're supposed to deliver for us. Because we believe it's very clear, it's a clear case. I'm not a police officer, but I can solve it. And so I'm hoping that they will continue to do what they have to do to solve that case. Our society is too small for this volume of criminal behavior. And we must ask ourselves why. And more so, and also in an environment where the people who were told, where the people who were bluffed, where they were fooled that they would be put first. Something is not right. What really does the government mean by putting people first? Is it dealings with lives of people? Is it dealings with livelihoods? What do you mean by putting people first? Because what we see manifested has nothing to do with putting people first. It cannot be. It's a state of confusion that we are all in, some people have no respect for the law, you know. And like I said, I could only encourage the police to be professional and do their job. Because it's only with professionalism and performance on the field of play that they will build the trust and confidence necessary for success in battling crime. They must be strong too. The fact that criminality is facilitated at the highest level is serious business and has implications for our society going forward. Look at the case of Ernest Hilaire. And there has been much debate on the facts of this matter, so I don't need to go there. I must say I know Ernest. I have worked with him on many occasions. And during the Cricket World Cup, I personally witnessed how meticulous he was in dealing with the issues before him. He knows that he blotched on this. You know, he bought a car and ownership is in question for 6 years. And implications, repercussions of your actions as a statesman. You know, come on. If the deal was straight, then this would not have been an issue consuming our people's and nation's attention, man. It is fraud. It is corruption. It is white-collar crime. I think every right-thinking, law-abiding citizen of this country has seen through the blatant act of disregard for the law, our rules and our regulations. Is this not corruption? You know, and what has been more disheartening was, as a nation, we witnessed the Prime Minister being center stage and rubbing this affair in the nation's face, as if we, the citizens, were the ones, you know, who had issues with Ernest. Ernest had an issue with the law. It cannot be the citizens. And to make matters worse, and to make matters even more worse, he has gone again and rubbed it in our face and appointed him, I don't know on what authority, had him appointed on his own authority, dictatorial, you may call that, you know, and had the Governor General issue an appointment based on what? I know when the Governor General appoints, because he has appointed me several times. He cites the clause in the Constitution that he has appointed me on. So I do not know in this case on what authority. So I can't speak to that, but I'm thinking it's clearly a breach of the law, a breach of the rules of this country. And you're rubbing it in our face in much the same way you rub it in our face when you went to ensure that the law, that the case was quashed against him. That's not right. It cannot be right. And as a law-abiding citizen, it cannot be right. You know, as a citizen, I thought, could you imagine Sir John, or even maybe we could say Mario Michel, imposing themselves in a scandal of that nature? Could you imagine Sir John would do that? What message was the Prime Minister trying to convey to us as a nation? Is that the type of behavior one must exhibit to achieve the reins of power in this country? Must men and women around the new Prime Minister break the law or attempt to break the law to be part of the elite team? This is scary.
Yes.
Can we not define leadership and politics better for the people of our country? Can we not do that? In a small country of 238 square miles, it's miles, I can't talk kilometers, it's too big, 600 and something, you know? But it's 238 square miles. Every child can relate to 200, you know? We are all connected as a citizenry. It is only the rule of law and objectivity and principles that will see us through. This is not impossible, it can be done. There are nations that have done it, like Singapore. But we need men and women of character who can lead us in the right direction. And what we see in labor is a team determined to destroy the moral fabric of our society. Law breaking, bluffing people, and putting people first All right. But they're putting them first on the breadline. These are key tenets we see in this organization. They espouse a Confucius doctrine of destroying and corrupting. You know, and creating, in the process, a society where greed, desperation, despair, and a sense of hopelessness will become the order of the day if we don't do something about it. That is what labor is offering to us. We cannot be happy with this. This is not what the current Prime Minister preached, you know, during his campaign. So he has left many citizens disappointed and bewildered. You see, but I'm not surprised, because such is the doctrine of the SLP, that yields the highest levels of employment. That's one. Corruption, victimization, vindictiveness, and all of this leads to the rise in criminal activity. So you can check the facts, you can check the history books. The librarians would tell you, I was in the library doing some research last week, and boy, I said to Madame, one of our key supporters, the same old, same old. And it's almost as if they go back in history and run this organization as if they're in 1979, 1980 mode. This is the reality, the non-caring and lawless nature of the Labour Party. How long are we as citizens of this country going to allow this to last? How long? I challenge our law-abiding citizens to look deep within themselves to confirm whether this cabal that represents us as a government is what we want to lead us through the difficulties that will continue to challenge our country, as predicted in Matthew 24. The UWP stands ready at any time to respond and serve our people, to reverse the actions of this disaster we call the government of the Labour Party. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Fortuna Belrose. In opposition, the St. Lucia Labour Party realized that the people of St. Lucia were desperate. The people of St. Lucia were desperate because of COVID and its effects. 15,000 jobs in the tourism industry were lost. There was a significant loss of revenue to the state. The people of St. Lucia were willing to grab at anything. Jobs within and throughout St. Lucia were cut back. Many St. Lucians were on the breadline. The government at that time, the United Workers' Party, gave the assistance that it was able to give with the resources that we had. The conversation was finding the delicate balance between lives and livelihoods, because neither could survive without the other. The SLP at that time knew that St. Lucia could not afford. However, they cried for, they screamed for, they rolled for the shutdown of this country at a time when the numbers were significantly less than what they are now. But yet still we observe that today the SLP has not shut down the country. They have opened schools. They have tried to carry on as if everything is normal, although we know that everything is not normal. realizing the serious position that existed in St. Lucia for all St. Lucians, and particularly those who were most affected by the downturn in the economy and the loss of jobs, the SLP promised to triple it, to give St. Lucians $1,500 a month. They promised that anyone earning $4,000 or less a month would pay no income taxes. They promised that anyone being owed tax returns of $5,000 or less would receive those refunds in the first 100 days. They promised a bonus to the frontline workers. Well, Christmas has come and gone, and there have been no bonuses paid. They also promised that the $1.50 surcharge, the tax on gasoline, which was used to fix our roads, would be removed for the fishermen because there are no roads in the sea. Still, apparently, roads still exist in the sea. The strategy of the St. Lucia Labour Party back then was to destabilize the government because they knew that the people were willing to grab at any promise of better days. But now in government, the SLP has realized that shutting down the country is not possible for any extended period of time. And this is the problem that they face. Because even now, they are unable to fulfill all the promises of 1,005, of 4,000, of 5,000, of 150, of bonuses, and every other promise they made in cabarets, on street corners, on their own virtual platforms, and everywhere else. They have been unable to fulfill because the economic devastation of COVID has no friends and has no favor. It did not favor the United Workers' Party, and it certainly is not favoring anyway the St. Lucia Labour Party. The St. Lucia Labour Party has great difficulty in finding that delicate balance between lives and livelihoods. And it is because they have no plan, because they did not work the mathematics properly, that they are terrified and exist only day by day without any visible long-term strategy. And this is why they refuse to follow their own advice. The numbers yesterday and the situation leading up to this vast increase to 427 cases leaves us all to wonder what the numbers will be like today. Coming up next, leader of the United Workers' Party, leader of the opposition, and former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Chastanet.
Good morning to everyone. I'm so impressed today with the speakers who spoke before me. Not taking anything away from Dominic, I expected what I heard from Dominic, but I wanted to say to the two ladies what a welcome it is to have you and your voices being heard. And as I've always indicated, that a woman's perspective and emotions are never to be underestimated. And probably today, what we're confronted with, it is that mother's perspective, that maternal perspective that is being triggered in the United Workers' Party the most. very easy to come here and highlight the egregious acts against our Constitution, the breach of the rule of law, the disdain that they have shown to the rule of law, because there are so many examples in the recent months. But they pale in comparison to the suffering that has already taken place, but certainly from us who have been in government and understand that policy and good governance and effectiveness matter, that the trend that we are currently on, that the amount of suffering that we have seen will pale in comparison to the amount of suffering that we're going to see down the road. In my own constituency, every single bus driver was replaced. Every single one of them. Really? That even for the average person who doesn't know much about the bus drivers in Micoud South would think that after all those years that every single person would be replaced at that time? What price, what penance are the constituents in my constituency being asked to play? I want to put the Labour Party on notice. I said it before, I'm going to say it again. Do not be comforted by the fact that in the House of Legislation, that is what the House of Parliament is for, that's what you elected to the House for, is to legislate. And that the mandate that you've been given is a supermajority. But do not fool yourself to believe that that mandate extends to everything in this country. Numbers don't lie. Only 51% of the people in St. Lucia chose to vote in the last elections, of which 55% voted for the Labour Party and 45% for United Workers' Party. That means that only 27% of the eligible voters in this country voted for the Labour Party. And means also that 73% of the people either did not vote or did not vote for Labour. And I dare say, with what we're seeing right now, that 27%, using Ras Aipa's analogy, that if we had to go and back to the polls today, I'm not so sure that they would get that 27% as we speak today. But Fortuna made the most important point, that if we are going to hold this government accountable, particularly with their mental state of mind of supremacy, one of arrogance, that people need to speak. And I've asked myself the question over and over, given what has taken place in the last 5 months, where are the voices of our civil society? Where are the voices of our community leaders? Where are the voices of our churches? Where are their voices? And in speaking to many people, the answer has been the same. Fear. Real fear of victimization. And who can blame them? Because if a government is doing the things that they're doing so blatantly, you campaign that there should not be a state of emergency, and despite the fact that you were repeatedly told that you require a state of emergency in order to have a curfew, You could not go back on that promise. And so you come up with confinement. You spit in the face of law-abiding people in this country and create a rule for yourself. And it is now coming home to roost because the people know it. And if you cannot follow the rule of the law, you expect the same people that you are governing to follow the rule of the law? We see what is taking place in the United Kingdom, where the Prime Minister, who has now confessed to attending parties during lockdowns, look what's happened. And they're holding him accountable. Where is that level of accountability here over the last Christmas? We saw what transpired in the House with regards to the Economic Fund. That in essence what they have done is amended the Act to allow Cabinet to make the decisions on how the CIP funds are going to be spent. That's all you need. Cabinet needs to approve. And I repeat, if that is the case, put the money back into the consolidated fund. There's no need to have a separate account, because at least there's going to be greater accountability if it's in the consolidated fund versus it being in a fund outside of the consolidated fund in the complete control of Cabinet. We've seen the Rover Gate situation. And I laugh at the suggestion that this is somehow personal or between myself and Ernest. I have no doubt that Ernest is a good father, good husband, good person. What I am obsessed with is any person who has taken up a leadership role in government to believe that the law does not apply to them. I will fight everyone who intends to cover up what is obvious. That a person of high authority used his position in order to get a personal benefit. That is called fraud. And I'm going to say it publicly again. In a letter that we had written to civil society before the previous elections, where I simply questioned Ernest Hilaire's integrity, that in the face of the facts that we have now, I can categorically say he has none. And he does not meet the qualifications to hold a post in government, particularly the post of the Minister of Investment and the post of the Minister of CIP, of which we would expect the persons there of the highest integrity. This is a man who has repeatedly lied. He lied when he purchased the car in his name and gave it to his brother. And the irony of all of that is that his brother, at the time of getting that car, was the head of SELEC, which is what? A regional organization for law enforcement of customs officers. Meaning that his job was to train and help prepare customs officers around the Caribbean to avoid people defrauding them. Yet he used his brother's, benefits for himself. A friend's discount. Ernest then lied again when he wrote to the British government and said the next car was going to belong to Tafawa Williams. And we know it wasn't a mistake because he transferred the money into Tafawa's account for Tafawa to pay for the car. Because he knew that in order to get the duty-free discount, the invoice and the registration and a letter from the High Commission had to say that the car belonged to Tafawa Williams. But when it was discovered that Tafawa could not benefit, he lied again. And he used his office and told the British government that the car belonged to the High Commission. Now, as a former permanent secretary, a learned man, was that a mistake? We know it was not a mistake. We don't have to guess, because the letters are there to suggest, to show that it was done deliberately. That's why I love the British sometimes. In the letter back to him, he said, in order to avoid any confusion, where it says owner's name, put the St. Lucia High Commission. Now, the issue at hand that we all seem to be confused about here is, yes, it was Ernest Hilaire's money that paid for the car. It is. He is the beneficial owner. But legally, when it was discovered that the car was in the name of the High Commission and it becomes a state asset, what is the authority that he would have used in order to have put the car in the name of the High Commission, and then for the state to have disposed of the vehicle and to give it back to him? The reality is that he never told the state. He lied. But sadly, the records in the UK have not lied and have shown that the car belongs to the state. So in all of this mess, the reputation of St. Lucia, once again, compliments of Ernest Hilaire, have been dragged through the mud. Our institutions that we depend on to govern us, and that we must give them the benefit of the doubt that they are honest people with integrity, and that they're going to follow the laws, because all these laws are there to do what? To protect us. That is ultimately who has been offended. That is ultimately who has been robbed. It is us, the people, who have been offended. Because it is our reputation in the United Kingdom. Do we want to be known as a bunch of liars and people who don't follow the rule of law? Is that what we are all about? A caller couldn't have said it better. If in fact what Ernest did was right, then why can't we all benefit? Why can't we all tell the High Commission to register a car in its name, get the duty free in the UK, and then give you back the car? I would like to think that that's what the Labour Party is going to do. Now they've discovered a loophole. And I can say now, because what made this matter even worse is how people have remained silent and tell you, oh, this is a political situation and we don't want to get involved. We really don't understand what the facts are. These are excuses not to deal with what the truth is. For those persons who, rightfully or wrongfully, and those institutions of civil society that have more fear of victimization, at what point are you going to realize that if you say nothing, there'll become a point where you will be able to say nothing? It is the same thing we say to those persons who choose not to vote. There's no such thing as not voting. When you don't vote, the party that wins is in essence, for some people, the party you voted for. if you remain silent on what are the rule of law, on our democracy, on integrity, on morality, and we don't hold all of our public servants to that standard, we all lose. We all lose. So I want to say that the greatest example of that is what's taking place right now with COVID. My office wrote a press statement a couple of months ago and indicated that it appeared that the now government had adopted a policy of herd immunity. Not herd immunity in vaccination, but a herd immunity in getting people infected. So when I hear a statement yesterday that the goal is to get rid of this fifth wave quickly, and you look at what are the policies, the protocols, the actions to support that statement, there are none. There's nothing. In essence, solutions have been left to their own. It doesn't take a mathematical genius to understand where we're heading. Norbert read some numbers that in comparison of January 7th or January 6th of 2021 versus January 6th of 2022. But in 2 short weeks or less, we've gone from 500 cases to 2,000. We heard Martinique had 7,000. We heard that Barbados had 500 in one day. President Biden is sending troops to 8 different states to provide support to the healthcare workers because the hospitals now and the health system is being overwhelmed. All of the evidence is there to tell us where this is heading. And the statements that are being made by the government, oh, but check the hospitalization. We only have 22 people in hospital. Yes, but you have 2,000 people and the absence of proper administered curfew quarantine facilities. People who are, I feel better, I'm going around. Today, one of our banks shut down, closed because too many people were infected. And we are going to see that trend continue. So the economic fallout from what is taking place is going to be serious. And I dare say to you, again, if you look at the science says what? Omicron is less, has less strength, less deadly than the previous ones, but it is highly infectious. And more so for persons who are double vaccinated, and even better yet if you are triple vaccinated, if you had your booster. So what are the numbers in St. Lucia? Only 25% of our population is vaccinated. And more importantly, we have one of the highest levels of diabetes and hypertension. So it means underlying conditions. And it doesn't matter how strong the strain is for those persons, and if they're not vaccinated, pli wosako. And so let us not comfort ourselves in the idea that there's not X number of people or there's still beds available at the respiratory center and the number of people in critical care, because it's just a matter of percentages. If in fact the numbers continue to grow exponentially, then it means that the numbers of people who are going to either get seriously ill or die, the potential for that is going to go up as well. Last January, confronted with much less numbers, but seeing what was happening globally as a result of Christmas and New Year's, my government made the difficult decisions, reducing curfew to 5 o'clock, eliminating the sale of liquor or limiting the sale of liquor in order to slow down the activity socially that was causing the spread. And doing that, it took us 4 months to bring the numbers back down. So you can imagine, in the absence of any changes in the protocol, nothing's going to change. And here's the most alarming part. The most alarming part is that even people in our societies, Sky FM, certainly my office, we're warning the government that Christmas and New Year's is coming, and you need to put protocols in place now in anticipation of that. So the idea of increasing curfew to 1 o'clock in the morning, knowing that the numbers were going up, knowing that you only had 100 beds, knowing the state of health of our country, meaning that understanding the science, and you still went ahead and did it. And that is why we can say for sure that the only thing that the Labour Party puts first is politics. It's politics first. We see it time and time again. So United Workers' Party, and I'm so proud to be here with these men and women and the many faces that are behind the scenes that are supporting the party, and the words of encouragement that I've certainly been getting, and I know the party's been getting by many people, that we will continue to be the voice of reason. Not an irresponsible voice, not one that is going to demonize foreign investment in this country simply to benefit. We're not going to be ones that are going to demonize tourism, our mainstay of our economy. We're not the one going to be demonizing the necessary protocols to fight COVID, because it is the same thing everywhere in the world. Social distancing, wearing your mask, hand sanitizing. That's what it is. And now that Labour Party, who did all of those things, demonized the foreign investment in this country, demonized tourism in this country, demonized the protocols, they now have found themselves having to reverse, flip-flop. They're realizing that there was no ever such thing as two St. Lucias. There was a protocol to allow our borders to remain open in a responsible way. And the idea of protocols of limiting people's socialization and trying our best to use enforcement to do it was not because we hated the people of St. Lucia, it's because we loved the people of St. Lucia. And we're sufficiently aware that when we use the term coexist with COVID, was the understanding that the government itself did not have all of the resources to deal with COVID. And we needed to bring the private sector and everybody else to play their part to be successful. So I leave on my last appeal again. I'm asking civil society, don't be fearful of victimization, because the victimization of labor can be overcome. But when we allow our country to be weakened to the extent that it's going to impact our healthcare system, it's going to impact the quality of education in our country, it's going to impact the ability to have a secure country, it's going to impact the ability to invest in infrastructure and create economic opportunities for people in this country. That is the thing that we should fear the most. And no government, regardless of the results of any election, has been given any mandate to destroy the fabric of St. Lucian life. And we must all be aware of that. And we must all be willing to play our part and to hold whichever government is in office accountable. So the idea that the teachers union was not consulted, how is that possible? How is that possible? But we will continue to address these issues. We will continue to meet with the people who are being victimized and to make sure that their voices are not lost, and to find ways to hold this government accountable within the rule of law. Within the rule of law, because we're not going to destroy the institutions that make up this country. We're not going to destroy the fabric of who we are as St. Lucians, simply for the purpose to be able to get into office. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Alan Chastanet, leader of the United Workers' Party, leader of the opposition, and former Prime Minister of St. Lucia. This brings us to the end of this first United Workers' Party press conference for 2022. I'd like to encourage everyone to please follow the protocols, wear your mask, hand sanitize, social distance. From the headquarters of the United Workers' Party at Colony House in Castries, I bid you good afternoon and a Happy New Year. Thank you very much.